Sarah had been married to David for 23 years. 23 years of trust, of believing that the person sleeping next to her was the person she thought she knew. But on a Tuesday night in March, at exactly 2:17 in the morning, everything changed. And it changed because of what she saw on a tiny screen that showed her the truth hiding behind the lies. She wasn't supposed to be awake that night. She had taken a sleeping pill around midnight, the same one she took every few weeks when stress from work kept her mind racing. But her body had woken her up anyway, something deep inside telling her that something was wrong. Sarah lay there in the darkness of their bedroom, listening to David's steady breathing beside her, listening to the sounds of their house settling in the night. And then she heard it. Footsteps. Soft, careful footsteps moving down the hallway toward their daughter's room. Her heart started beating faster. It was 2:17 in the morning. Why would David be going to their daughter's room at 2:17 in the morning? She told herself there could be 1,000 reasons. Maybe Emma was sick. Maybe she had a nightmare. Maybe she was having trouble sleeping and needed her father. But something about the way those footsteps moved, something about the quietness of them, the deliberateness, made the hair on Sarah's arms stand straight up. She got out of bed slowly, quietly, and moved to the door. The hallway was dark except for the small nightlight that cast a pale glow near Emma's room. Sarah crept forward, her bare feet silent on the carpet. She could see a thin line of light under Emma's door. She pressed her ear against it and heard David's voice, very quiet, very calm. He was saying something to Emma, but she couldn't make out the words. She heard the sound of something being set down. Glass on wood. Then she heard David leaving the room, closing the door with barely a whisper of sound. Sarah quickly moved back toward the bedroom, her mind spinning. What was that? What was David doing? She climbed back into bed and lay there, staring at the ceiling, sleep now completely impossible. Her thoughts were racing, tumbling over each other like clothes in a dryer. Every time she tried to make sense of what she had just heard, another question popped into her head. And they were the kind of questions that didn't have good answers. The next morning, Sarah watched David at breakfast. He seemed normal. He smiled at Emma. He poured juice. He asked about school. He was exactly the David she knew. But now there was a crack in that image, a place where doubt had seeped in. She watched Emma too. Her daughter looked tired. More tired than usual. She had been looking more tired for months now, come to think of it. Sarah had noticed it but never really thought about it. Teenagers were always tired, weren't they? Staying up late on their phones, dealing with school stress. But this was different. Emma looked drained in a way that didn't make sense. That afternoon, Sarah made a decision that surprised her. She bought a small hidden camera online. She told herself she was being paranoid, that she would find out there was nothing wrong, that David would just be checking on Emma to make sure she was sleeping well or something perfectly innocent like that. But she also knew, deep down, that something wasn't right. The camera arrived the next day. It was small, about the size of a phone charger, and it could record video to a memory card. That night, after David had gone to bed, Sarah quietly installed it in Emma's room, disguised as a charging adapter on the shelf near her bed. She didn't have to wait long. At 2:15 in the morning, just as she had heard before, David's footsteps moved down the hallway. Sarah watched on her phone as the bedroom door opened. David came into view on the tiny screen. But what she saw made her blood turn to ice. David wasn't just checking on Emma. He had something in his hands. A glass of water and a small bottle. He sat down on the edge of Emma's bed and gently shook their daughter awake. The video was silent, but Sarah could see David's lips moving. She could see Emma's confused face as she woke up. And then David held out the glass of water and the bottle. Emma reached out, clearly confused, still half asleep. But David kept talking, and Emma, still drowsy, took the bottle from her father's hands. The video quality wasn't perfect, but Sarah could see clearly as David watched Emma put 2 pills in her mouth and drink the water. David stayed there for a few minutes, watching Emma lie back down, waiting until he was sure Emma was falling back asleep. Then he got up and left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. The whole thing had taken less than 10 minutes. Sarah's hands were shaking as she watched it again. And again. She pulled up the video file and looked at the timestamp. 2:17 in the morning. Exactly what she had heard the night before. She felt sick. Her stomach twisted into knots. What were those pills? Why was David giving them to Emma in the middle of the night? Why was he being so secretive about it? If Emma needed medicine, why not give it to her during the day? Why not tell Sarah? She sat there in the darkness of the living room, her phone screen glowing in her hands, watching her husband do something to their daughter that she couldn't understand. But she knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening, it was not okay. Whatever was happening in that room at 2:17 in the morning was something that needed to stay secret. And that meant it was something wrong. Sarah looked at the phone. She looked at the time. 3:47 in the morning. She had to decide what to do with what she now knew. She had to decide if she was going to confront David, or if she was going to dig deeper. She had to decide what kind of mother and wife she was going to be. Because one thing was clear now. The man sleeping in her bed was not the man she thought she knew. Before I go any further with this powerful story, I want to say thank you so much for being here with me. If this story is gripping you the way it's gripping me, please like this, share it with someone you trust, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Where are you watching from right now? I would absolutely love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you think is happening. Tell me where you're watching from. Let's connect. Because stories like this, stories about trust and betrayal and the courage it takes to face the truth, these stories matter. And they matter more when we experience them together. Sarah didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She sat in the darkness of the living room with her phone, watching the video over and over again, each time hoping she had misunderstood what she was seeing. But each time it was the same. David, moving quietly down the hallway. David, sitting on Emma's bed. David, giving their daughter pills in the middle of the night. The reality didn't change no matter how many times she watched it. When the sun came up, Sarah felt like she was living in two worlds at once. There was the world where she sat at the breakfast table with David and Emma, where everything looked normal and safe and like the life she had always known. And there was the other world, the one that existed inside her phone, the one that showed her something dark and secret happening in the middle of the night. She couldn't reconcile them. They didn't fit together. Emma came downstairs looking exhausted. She moved slowly, like every step took effort. She sat down at the table and poured cereal into a bowl without speaking. David smiled at her and asked how she had slept. Emma just shrugged and said fine. But Sarah could see that she wasn't fine. She could see it in the way her daughter's eyes were unfocused, in the way her hands moved slowly, almost like she was moving through water instead of air. After Emma left for school and David left for his office, Sarah made a decision that surprised her. She was going to search David's things. She didn't like doing it. It felt wrong and invasive. But what she had seen on that video felt wrong too, and it felt a lot more wrong than searching through her husband's personal space. She went into their bedroom and looked around carefully, trying to think like David. Where would he keep pills? Where would he hide something he didn't want anyone to find? She checked the bathroom first. She opened every drawer, every cabinet, looking for anything that seemed out of place. She found the normal things that belonged in a bathroom. Shaving cream. Cologne. Pain relievers for headaches. Nothing strange. She moved to the bedroom and checked his nightstand. Just books, a lamp, his phone charger. She sat on the edge of the bed, frustrated. Where else would he keep something like that? Then she remembered. David had a small home office in the basement where he kept his personal files and documents and things like that. He said it was for work, but Sarah rarely went down there. David liked his privacy, and she had always respected that. But now, that privacy felt suspicious. That privacy felt like it was hiding something. Sarah went downstairs and opened the door to his office. The room was neat and organized, with filing cabinets and a desk and bookshelves. She didn't want to do this. This felt like crossing a line. But the image of Emma swallowing those pills kept playing in her mind, and she knew she had to keep going. She opened the first filing cabinet. Work documents. Tax returns. Nothing suspicious. She opened the second one and found more of the same. Personal files. Medical records. And then in the very back of the drawer, behind a folder marked Insurance, her fingers touched something else. A small cardboard box. She pulled it out carefully. Inside the box was a bottle. A small brown bottle with no label. Sarah's hands started shaking as she picked it up. The bottle was light. Almost empty. She opened it and tilted it so she could see inside. There was a white powder coating the bottom. She put it to her nose very carefully and smelled it. It had a slightly bitter smell, medicinal. This was it. This was what David had been giving to Emma. But what was it? Sarah took a picture of the bottle with her phone and looked up the brown bottle online, searching for any clues. Nothing came up. She searched for unlabeled medicine bottles and suspicious pills, and got mostly health websites that didn't help. She knew she needed to take the bottle to someone who could test it, who could tell her what it was. But who? If she took it to a doctor, they might call the police. If she took it to a hospital, she would need to explain everything. She felt trapped, caught between needing answers and being terrified of what those answers might be. Then she remembered something. Years ago, when Emma was little, she had gotten very sick. A doctor named Sarah Chen had taken care of her, and she had been kind and thorough, and Sarah had never forgotten her. She looked up her number. She was still practicing, still working in the same office where she had treated Emma. Sarah called the office and asked if she could come in for a private consultation. She said it was urgent and personal. They fit her in for the next afternoon. When Sarah walked into Dr. Chen's office, her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She sat down across from her and started to explain, her words coming out in a rush. She told her about hearing David in the hallway at night. She told her about the hidden camera. She told her about seeing David give pills to Emma. She told her about finding the unlabeled bottle. And she pulled out the bottle and handed it to her. Dr. Chen's face changed as she listened. Her expression went from concern to shock to very serious. She took the bottle and examined it carefully, turning it over in her hands. She asked Sarah detailed questions about what she had seen, about when it was happening, about how Emma had been acting lately. When Sarah told her that Emma seemed tired and confused and drained, Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. She said, "I can't test this in my office, but I can send it to a lab." "But Sarah, I have to tell you, if what you're describing is true, if your husband is giving your daughter medication without your knowledge, that's not just wrong. That's abuse. That could be poisoning." The word poisoning hung in the air between them like a heavy stone. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. But Dr. Chen wasn't done. She said, "There's something called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's when a caregiver, usually a parent, harms someone they're taking care of to get attention or sympathy. But sometimes it's about control. Sometimes it's about money." She paused and looked at Sarah. "Has anything changed in your family finances recently? Have there been any talks about inheritance or money?" Sarah thought about it. She had a trust fund that had been set up by her parents years ago. It was substantial. Emma would inherit it when she turned 25, but if something happened to Sarah, Emma could get access to it earlier. She had never thought much about it. It was just there like oxygen. But now, the way Dr. Chen was looking at her, she realized that David would know about it. David would know exactly how much money was there. Dr. Chen sent the bottle to a lab and told Sarah she would call her as soon as she had results. She also asked her to document everything. Keep watching the camera. Write down the times. Record anything unusual. She gave her the number of a lawyer she knew who handled family cases. She said Sarah needed to talk to a lawyer before she talked to anyone else, including the police. That night, Sarah watched the camera again at 2:17 in the morning. David came into Emma's room again. This time she was looking at it differently. This time she wasn't just seeing a man giving his daughter pills. This time she was seeing a pattern. This time she was seeing control. This time she was seeing something that looked like love but felt like something much darker. And for the first time since she discovered the truth, Sarah let herself ask the question that terrified her most. How long had this been happening? How many pills had Emma taken? What had those pills done to her? And most terrifying of all, what was David planning to do next? Sarah picked up her phone and called the lawyer's number that Dr. Chen had given her. It was late, but she left a message saying it was urgent. She said she needed help. She said her daughter's life might be in danger. And as she hung up the phone, Sarah realized that her marriage, the one she had built over 23 years, was about to explode into pieces. But she also knew that she didn't have a choice anymore. She had to protect Emma. Whatever the cost, whatever it meant for her life, for David, for everything she had believed in, she had to protect her daughter. The lawyer's name was James Patterson, and he called Sarah back at 7 in the morning. Sarah was already awake, hadn't slept, was sitting in the garage with a cup of cold coffee trying to think. James's voice was calm and direct. He said, Don't say anything to your husband. Don't confront him. Don't let him know you know. We need evidence, and we need it to be undeniable. Can you do that? Sarah said she could. She also told James about the hidden camera and the bottle. James said to keep both safe and keep recording. He said he was going to contact a toxicologist and a social worker and someone from Child Protective Services. He said this was going to move fast once it started moving, and Sarah needed to be ready. Then James asked the question that made Sarah's stomach drop. He asked if Sarah had any other children. Sarah said no. Just Emma. James said, "Good. That makes things simpler. But I want you to think about something. If your husband is doing this to Emma, why? What does he get out of it? There has to be a reason. Money, attention, control. Usually it's all three. I want you to think about what David might want that he doesn't have right now. Think hard about that." After they hung up, Sarah sat with that question. What did David want? She thought about their marriage. It was good, she thought. They weren't exciting anymore, not like when they were young, but they were comfortable. They were partners. They had built a life together. But David had always wanted more. More money. More status. More control over how things were done. He had wanted to move to a bigger house. He had wanted Emma to go to a private school. He had wanted a lot of things that Sarah had said no to because the money didn't make sense. And then it clicked. The trust fund. If something happened to Sarah, the trust fund would go to Emma. But Emma would be young. She would need a guardian. She would need someone to manage her money. Someone like David. If Emma was sick, if Emma was mentally foggy and dependent, if David had power of attorney over Emma's finances, David would have control of millions of dollars. Millions of dollars that would be his to spend, to invest, to use however he wanted. That was the reason. That was why David was doing this. He wanted the money. And he was willing to hurt their daughter to get it. The lab results came back 3 days later. Dr. Chen called Sarah and her voice was very serious. She said, "The bottle contains a combination of medications. Specifically, it contains a sedative, an antidepressant at a much higher dose than is safe for a teenager, and something else. Something that slows down cognitive function. The combination would make someone feel tired, confused, unable to think clearly. Over time, with repeated doses, it could cause serious damage to a developing brain." Sarah felt the room spin around her. She had to sit down. Dr. Chen continued, "This is not something a parent gives a child accidentally. This is not a mistake. This is deliberate poisoning, Sarah. And it needs to stop right now." That afternoon, Sarah met with James in his office. James had brought in a woman named Rebecca Torres, who was a social worker with the state's Child Protective Services. Rebecca was direct and no-nonsense. She said they had a few options. Option 1 was to remove Emma from the home immediately. Option 2 was to confront David with the evidence and see if he would confess. Option 3 was to set up a situation where they could catch David in the act with police present. James recommended option 3. He said it would make the case airtight. He said they would need Emma to cooperate, and they would need to explain to Emma what was happening. That was going to be hard. That was going to hurt. But it would protect Emma better than anything else. That night, Sarah told Emma everything. She sat her down in Dr. Chen's office, with Rebecca Torres there to help. She showed her the video. She told her about the bottle. She told her what the lab tests showed. She watched her daughter's face as she understood that her father, the man who had tucked her into bed her whole life, had been poisoning her. Emma cried. She cried hard, the kind of crying that comes from deep inside, from the place where trust has been shattered. She said, "Dad gave me those pills? My own dad." And Sarah held her and said yes, and she was so sorry, and it wasn't Emma's fault, and they were going to stop it. Emma asked why. Sarah told her the truth. She told her about the money. She told her that her father wanted control, and he had decided to hurt Emma to get it. The plan was set for the next night. Sarah would pretend to be asleep. Police would be stationed outside Emma's room with body cameras. When David came into the room at 2:17 in the morning, when he gave Emma the pills, the police would come in and arrest him. It would be captured on multiple cameras. It would be undeniable. That day felt like the longest day of Sarah's life. She went through the motions. She went to work. She came home. She had dinner with David and Emma. David seemed normal. He smiled. He asked about work. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. Emma was quiet, but David didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't care anymore. Maybe David had already written Emma off in his mind as a tool to get money, nothing more. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Sarah got into bed. David was already asleep beside her. She lay there, heart pounding, waiting. At 2:15, David got out of bed. He was so careful, moving so quietly. He didn't turn on any lights. He went into Emma's room. Sarah waited, counting the seconds. And then the light came on. The police officers moved into the room. They had the bottle in David's hand. They had the pills. They had David standing over Emma's bed, caught in the act. Sarah heard David's shocked voice saying, "What are you doing in here? Get out of my daughter's room." But his voice changed when the police officers told him he was under arrest. David was arrested at 2:23 in the morning. He was taken out of the house in handcuffs. Neighbors who had been woken by the commotion stood in their yards, watching in shock. Their street, their quiet, safe street, suddenly filled with police cars and lights. The next morning, everything was different. David was gone. Emma was traumatized but safe. Sarah was broken and grieving and angry all at once. The story started to come out. Local news picked it up. Father arrested for poisoning teenage daughter. Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Inheritance scheme. Money and control. James told Sarah that David would face multiple charges. Assault. Attempted poisoning. Fraud. Abuse of a minor. He would face a long prison sentence if convicted. David's lawyer wanted to make a deal, but James said no. The evidence was too strong. The case was too clear. David had done it, and he needed to face the consequences. But even with David arrested, even with the danger removed, Emma was still struggling. She was still dealing with the betrayal. Still dealing with the fact that her father had hurt her intentionally. A therapist named Dr. Williams started working with Emma, helping her process the trauma, helping her understand that what happened was not her fault. And Sarah had to face her own reality. She had been married to someone she didn't know. She had trusted someone who had betrayed that trust in the most fundamental way possible. She had missed the signs for months. She would carry that guilt for a long time. But she had also found the truth. She had been brave enough to look for it, even when she didn't want to know what it was. And she had protected her daughter. In the end, that was what mattered most. 6 months passed. 6 months of court dates and therapy sessions and difficult conversations, and slowly, very slowly, beginning to heal. David pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. When the judge announced the sentence, Emma was sitting in the courtroom with Sarah. She didn't cry. She just stared forward, her face empty, like she was watching something far away that no one else could see. After the sentencing, David was taken back to his cell. He didn't look at Sarah or Emma as he was led away. It was like they had already stopped existing for him. But Emma watched him go, and something changed in her face. It was relief. It was anger. It was sadness. It was all of those things at once. The weeks after the sentencing were harder than Sarah expected. Emma got better physically. The fog cleared from her mind. Her energy came back. She started being able to think clearly again. But emotionally, she was struggling. She had nightmares. She had moments where she would cry without warning. She had trust issues that showed up in unexpected ways. Little things like not wanting to eat food that Sarah had prepared without watching her make it first. Dr. Williams, Emma's therapist, said this was normal. She said trauma doesn't disappear overnight. She said that what David had done was a fundamental betrayal, and it would take time for Emma to learn how to trust again, and it would take time for her to rebuild her relationship with the concept of safety. She said Emma would likely struggle with this for years, maybe even her whole life. But she also said that with support and love and professional help, Emma would heal. She would find her way to a new normal. One afternoon, about 8 months after David's arrest, Emma was sitting in the kitchen with Sarah, and she said something that Sarah had been waiting to hear. She said, "Mom, I'm ready to talk about what happened. Not to a therapist. To you." Sarah sat down across from her, her heart beating carefully, like she was afraid any sudden movement might scare her away. Emma talked for an hour. She talked about when she first started noticing she was confused. She talked about trying to tell her father something was wrong, and him just smiling and saying everything was fine. She talked about the shame she felt, thinking there was something wrong with her brain, that she was broken somehow. She talked about how angry she was at her father. And she talked about how scared she was that Sarah would be angry at her too, even though she didn't understand why Sarah would be. Sarah cried as she listened to her daughter. She cried for what Emma had suffered. She cried for the time that had been stolen from her. She cried for the father Emma had lost, not because David was dead, but because the father Emma thought she had turned out to never have existed at all. When Emma finished talking, Sarah held her while she cried too. That same month, Emma told Sarah she wanted to do something with her experience. She wanted to help other people. She had been doing research, and she found an organization called Healing Bonds. It was a non-profit that worked with families affected by Munchausen syndrome by proxy and other forms of medical abuse. They provided support groups, therapy resources, and education. Emma wanted to volunteer there. Sarah thought it was a good idea. She thought it was Emma taking something that had hurt her and turning it into something that could help others. She thought it was brave and beautiful and exactly the kind of thing that her daughter was capable of doing. She helped Emma get involved with the organization. Within a few months, Emma was leading a support group for teenagers who had experienced medical abuse by a caregiver. For Sarah herself, the healing was slower. She had to face some hard truths about herself. She had to think about how she had missed the signs. She had to think about why she had trusted David so completely without questioning anything. She had to think about her own role in what had happened, not because it was her fault, but because understanding it would help her grow as a person and as a mother. She went to therapy too. A therapist named Dr. Raymond helped her work through the guilt and the anger and the grief of losing the marriage she thought she had. Dr. Raymond helped Sarah understand that betrayal is about the person doing the betraying, not about the person being betrayed. It wasn't Sarah's fault that David had made the choices he made. But Sarah could learn from it. Sarah could become more aware. Sarah could become the kind of mother and person who noticed when things weren't right, and who had the courage to do something about it. 1 year after David's arrest, the local news did a follow-up story. They interviewed Sarah and Emma about their journey. They talked about the importance of trusting your instincts. They talked about how Sarah had sensed something was wrong and had investigated instead of ignoring it. They talked about how Emma had survived something that could have destroyed her, and how she was now helping others who had experienced similar trauma. The story went viral. Thousands of people watched it. Hundreds of people commented, sharing their own stories of abuse or suspicion. Some people talked about loved ones they had suspected of harming their children but hadn't known how to report it. Some people talked about their own experiences of being hurt by people they trusted. The story opened a conversation that needed to happen. A year and a half after David's arrest, Emma graduated from high school. Sarah sat in the auditorium watching her daughter walk across the stage to accept her diploma. She wore a white dress and white shoes, and she smiled as she shook the principal's hand. When she came back to her seat, Sarah saw her looking for her in the crowd. When their eyes met, she smiled even bigger. That smile said so many things. It said thank you for believing me. It said thank you for protecting me. It said I survived and I'm still here and I'm going to be okay. After the ceremony, Emma told Sarah that she had decided what she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to go to college to study psychology. She wanted to become a therapist who specialized in trauma and family abuse. She wanted to dedicate her life to helping other people who had experienced what she had experienced. Sarah hugged her daughter and told her that she was proud of her. She told her that Emma's strength and her courage and her determination were incredible. She told her that her father had tried to destroy her, and Emma had refused to be destroyed. That night, Sarah sat alone in the living room of the house where so much had happened. So much pain and betrayal and fear. She thought about David, sitting in a prison cell, serving his sentence. She thought about the man she had married and the person he had turned out to be. She thought about how fragile trust is, and how quickly the world can change when that trust is broken. But she also thought about Emma. She thought about how her daughter had survived. She thought about how Emma was turning her pain into purpose. She thought about the smile on her face when she walked across that graduation stage. She thought about the future that was waiting for her, a future that David couldn't touch anymore, a future that belonged only to Emma. And Sarah realized something important. The light that had been turned on when she discovered the truth, the light that had exposed David's terrible secret, that light hadn't just revealed darkness. It had also revealed strength. It had revealed love. It had revealed the incredible resilience of her daughter. It had revealed that even when the worst things happen, even when the people we trust betray us, there is still a way forward. There is still healing. There is still hope. Sarah stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the world was dark, but there were lights on in the neighborhood. Lights in other houses. Other families. Other lives being lived. She wondered how many of those homes held secrets. She wondered how many people were suffering in silence, not knowing that they could reach out for help, not knowing that there were people who would believe them and fight for them. She pulled out her phone and texted Emma. She wrote, "I'm so proud of you. For everything you've survived and everything you're going to do. Thank you for being brave." Emma texted back right away. "Thank you for being brave too, Mom. For listening to your instincts. For protecting me. For never giving up on finding the truth. I love you." Sarah sat back down in the darkness, her phone glowing in her hands, feeling more grateful than she had felt in a very long time. The journey had been terrible and painful and had changed everything about her life. But it had also shown her something important. It had shown her that love is not about blind trust. Love is about protection. Love is about doing the hard thing when the easy thing would be to look away. Love is about standing up for the people you care about, no matter what the cost. And as Sarah sat there in the darkness, knowing that her daughter was safe, knowing that she was healing, knowing that she was going to go out into the world and help other people, Sarah realized that something good had come from all of this pain. Something beautiful had come from what could have been a tragedy. And that was the real victory. That was the real redemption. Not that David had been punished, though that mattered. But that Emma had survived. That Emma was thriving. That Emma was turning her suffering into service. That Sarah and her daughter had found their way back to each other, stronger than they had been before, bonded by truth and courage and the kind of love that doesn't break when tested. This is the moment where I need to tell you something really important. If you're watching this and you've experienced something like what Sarah and Emma went through, if you know someone who might be hurt by a caregiver, please reach out for help. Trust your instincts. The feeling in your gut that tells you something is wrong, that feeling exists for a reason. Don't ignore it. Don't convince yourself that everything is fine when it isn't. If you love this story, if it grabbed your heart and made you think about trust and courage and the strength it takes to face the truth, please like this video right now. Please share it with someone you care about. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might matter to your life. And I really want to know, where are you watching from? What part of the world are you in right now? Leave a comment and tell me. Tell me what you thought about Sarah and Emma's journey. Tell me if this story reminded you of something in your own life. Let's connect. Let's build a community of people who care about truth and courage and protecting the people we love. Where are you watching from? I would love to hear from you. Tell me your location. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me if this story moved you. You are what makes this matter. Thank you so much for being here with me, for listening to this story, for caring about what happened to this family. If you ever find yourself in a situation like Sarah's, where you sense something is deeply wrong, trust that instinct. Be brave like Sarah was brave. Protect the people you love. Shine the light on the truth, no matter how dark it is, because the light always reveals a path forward. The light always brings hope. Thank you again for being here. Please like, share and subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from. Let's stay connected. You matter. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Thank you.